On this video, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, a lady who's made a huge impact upon the diabetic community. Her name is Jenny Ruhl, and when I discovered her books and her website, I realized that she and I thought a lot alike. In fact, it was sort of uncanny just how much we thought alike when it comes to getting your blood sugar down into a normal range. I said that Jenny Ruhl was a friend of mine. Now, I didn't mean that in the sense that we actually know each other. Truth is, I've never met her or communicated with her. But I consider her a friend because in reading her books, I've been greatly blessed and confirmed in my own approach to conquering runaway blood sugar. In fact, we are so similar in what we believe and the means by which we attack high blood sugar that if you read her books and her website and then you read my books and watched my YouTube videos, you might be convinced that either she or I copied from the other. Well, she definitely did not copy from me since she's been struggling with and overcoming high blood sugar since 1998, whereas my first book didn't come out until around 2006. Nor did I copy from her since by the time I discovered her, I was already using pretty much the same approach that I use today to determine which foods and which meals are safe for me. But when you read her book, Blood Sugar 101, What They Don't Tell You About Diabetes, you'll recognize that we definitely think alike. Another area in which we are alike is that neither one of us is a doctor. Jenny is a former software developer and she's written several novels. She is a very sharp lady, however, and she learned early on to do lots and lots of post-meal tests with her blood sugar meter. And as she tested herself again and again, she discovered what virtually every person will discover who starts testing their blood sugar like crazy. She learned, surprise, surprise, that carbohydrates raise blood sugar. Now, I know there are people who say that carbs are fine and they're even desirable for diabetics, but these people who say that are almost always, one, not diabetics, and two, they are not fanatical blood sugar testers. They have a great theory, but that's about all they have. The truth is, I've never found any diabetic who tests their blood sugar a lot, especially after meals when their blood sugar hits its peak. Well, I've never found anybody like that who didn't come to the same conclusion, which is that we who have diabetic tendencies need to be really, really cool about our carbohydrate consumption. You will not find Jenny Ruhl on YouTube. She apparently has no interest in making videos, but she has a couple of very helpful books and a huge website that can serve as a great resource for diabetics. Her website is at bloodsugar101.com, and I'll put a link to that website in the description. For today, I want to look at the information she gives on one of those web pages which has the simple title, How to Lower Your Blood Sugar. It's not a long page, and it's not that complicated, but for most diabetics, it is more powerful, more effective, and more helpful than attending some 6-hour lectures by registered dietitians. Jenny writes these words, "Over the past decade and a half, thousands of people with type 2 diabetes have dramatically lowered their blood sugar using this very simple technique. Unlike most other strategies you may have encountered, this one does not tell you what to eat. Instead, it teaches you how the meals you are currently eating affect your blood sugar and then guides you through the process of adapting those meals so that they'll be more blood sugar friendly. Try it for a week and you'll see how well it works." And then she gives 3 steps. Step 1, eat whatever you've been eating and write it all down. Eat normally, but use your blood sugar meter to test yourself at the following times. Write down what you ate and what your blood sugar results were upon waking, your fasting glucose, 1 hour after each meal, and 2 hours after each meal. Well, isn't that interesting? She's telling us to check what foods are doing to us by figuring out how high they send our blood sugar. And that's exactly what I learned to do as I began to test myself. It's not enough just to measure your blood sugar in the morning and then lay aside your meter until the next morning. You must figure out what specific foods and specific meals are doing to your blood sugar. So Jenny says, write down your meals and how high they drive your blood sugar. to which I say a great big amen. Jenny writes, people often ask where to start measuring the hour after eating. For most people, measuring from the end of the meal works well. If you take more than 45 minutes to eat your meal, measure from when you eat the course that contains the most starch and sugar. What this will tell you is when your blood sugar is at its highest after your meal and how long it takes to drop back down. Most people also will see that all starches and sugars, even the ones that nutritionists tell us are healthy, like so-called whole grains and fruits, can raise our blood sugars dramatically compared to fats and proteins. Well, isn't that interesting? She says starches and fruits can raise blood sugar dramatically. But many nutritionists tell us that these things are fine. Where in the world did she come up with such a notion? Who does she think she is? Well, she came up with that info the same way that I came up with it, by fanatically testing my blood sugar and figuring out which foods and which meals raise blood sugar and which ones do not raise it, or do not raise it very much. It would seem that she is good friends with my friend, Mike the Meter. Okay, let's go on with step 2 of Jenny's program. In step 2, she writes, for the next few days, cut back on your carbohydrates. Cut back on breads, cereals, rice, beans, any wheat products, potatoes, corn, and fruit. If you're eating gluten-free foods, stop eating anything designed to replace wheat-based foods too. Get most of your carbohydrates from veggies. Test your modified meals using the same schedule above. See what impact you can make on your blood sugar by eliminating various high-carbohydrate foods. Be aware, says Jenny, that some foods, like pasta, digest slowly, so you won't see a blood sugar spike 1 hour after eating, or even at times 2. But if you test pasta at 4 or 5 hours after eating, you may see a spike. If a food seems too good to be true, test another hour or 2 later. The closer we get to non-diabetic readings, the greater chance we have of avoiding horrible complications. Here are what doctors currently believe to be non-diabetic readings. For your fasting blood sugar, it should be under 100 milligrams per deciliter. 1 hour after meals, it should be under 140 milligrams per deciliter. And 2 hours after meals, it should be under 120 milligrams per deciliter. If you can do better than this, go for it. At a minimum, the American College of Clinical Endocrinologists recommends that people with diabetes keep their blood sugars under 140 milligrams per deciliter 2 hours after eating. When you achieve normal blood sugar targets, you can start cautiously adding back carbohydrates, making sure to test after each meal. Stop adding carbs as soon as you get near your blood sugar targets. Recent studies have indicated that your after-meal numbers are those most indicative of future complications, especially heart problems. All right, let me interrupt Jenny for a bit and interject a few of my own thoughts here. One of the biggest criticisms I've had with my YouTube channel is the fact that I often test at 1 hour post-meal to find my peak. People just scream at me, "Don't you know that everybody says you must test at 2 hours, not 1 hour? 2 hours is what tells the story," they say, not 1 hour. Well, it may for some, but not for me it doesn't. 2 hours does not tell the tale at all, because in my case, I usually hit my blood sugar peak at 1 hour. If I waited 2 hours before testing, I would miss out on what a particular food or meal is doing to me. Let me give you an example. A while back, I compared 2 different morning cereals, Cocoa Puffs and granola. Now, with the Cocoa Puffs, I actually peaked earlier than usual. I hit 198 in 30 minutes after eating the Cocoa Puffs. At 1 hour, I was already on my way back down and was at 182. At 2 hours, my blood sugar had gone down to 131. Now, if I only tested myself at 2 hours after my meal with the Cocoa Puffs and saw a reading of 131, I might think that Cocoa Puffs aren't too bad. But it wasn't at all good for me to send my glucose soaring to 198 at 30 minutes. Now, here's the deal. When I test myself after meals, what I'm looking to find out is one thing. What is the worst damage this meal will do to me, blood sugar-wise? Just how high is it going to spike my blood sugar? Research indicates that spiking our blood sugar too high, even if it does come down in a couple of hours, is not at all good for us. Having your glucose bouncing up and down like a rubber ball is not a healthy situation. And I determined long ago that I was not going to let that happen to me. And any food or meal that bounces my blood sugar anywhere close to 200 is totally unacceptable. Some people say, well, blood sugar spikes are natural. We all have them. No, we don't all have spikes that go from 100 to 200 in 30 minutes. If your glucose goes from an 82 to a 118 in an hour, fine, you're doing great. But if it's jumping 100 points in an hour, you're not doing at all well. Now, I've told you before that my target for blood sugar spikes is a limit of 140. That's as high as I want it to go. And that is something I did get from Jenny. Until reading Jenny, I just knew the difference between high and low spikes, and I always shot for the lower spikes. But after reading her recommendations for a 140 limit, I adopted that for myself. So I have to give Jenny the credit for that. Okay, let's go on to step 3. Jenny writes, Step 3, test, test, test. Remember, we're not in a race or a competition with anyone but ourselves. Play around with your food plan. Test, test, test. Learn what foods cause blood sugar spikes and what foods cause cravings. Learn which foods give you healthy blood sugars. No matter what anyone tells you, and let me just stop and run that by you again. No matter what anyone tells you, if a food raises your blood sugar over the targets that you're aiming for, that food should not be part of your diabetes food plan. Your blood sugar meter will tell you what the best diabetes diet is for your body. Use it and regain your health. Well, going back to my own thoughts, isn't that a novel idea? Allowing your blood sugar meter to tell you the best diabetic diet for you. Rather than adopt the theory of some celebrity doctor, just take your little $20 or $30 or $40 glucometer and allow it to tell you what is safe to eat and what is forbidden and dangerous. And the interesting thing about this is that people who do this, who allow their meters to dictate their diets, will all come down on the side of a low-carb or keto diet. Virtually every single one of them. And the beautiful thing about your meter is that he does not even have a trace of bias. He has one job, and that is to tell you what your current diet and your last meal have done to your blood sugar. There are some doctors that preach a purely vegan diet, but when you look at their personal information, you discover that they're entirely opposed to killing animals or eating meat. They think it's a crime and a terrible sin. So of course they're going to look for anything they can find and any excuse they can come up with and any obscure study they can manufacture or find that will say that meat eating is not healthy for you. But of course they feel this way because they've decided long ago that it is criminal to kill and eat animals. So surely, in their minds, it must not be healthy either. But Mike, the blood sugar meter, does not think like this. In fact, he doesn't think much at all. He just reads your blood sugar level and lets you know what it is. And when you eat a 2-pound steak, he'll tell you your blood sugar barely raised at all. But when you eat a baked potato, he'll tell you it shot up into the stratosphere. He's not biased. He has no prejudice. He has no dietary partiality. He's just who he is, Mike the meter, who tells it like it is. I hope you'll check out Jenny Ruhl's website, bloodsugar101.com, and consider getting her book, Blood Sugar 101. Jenny sent a copy of her book to Dr. Richard Bernstein, who is, in my mind, the premier authority on diabetes. And he sent her a note which said, "Thanks for sending me a copy of Blood Sugar 101. I enjoyed it very much and actually learned a lot of important facts. I was impressed by your ability to scour the scientific literature and document your findings. I think this book should be read by diabetics because of the valuable material that cannot be found elsewhere." Wow! Anybody who can write a book on diabetes and get Dr. Richard Bernstein to endorse it and to say that he learns some things from it isn't doing too bad. So to summarize Jenny Ruhl's 3-step plan for lowering blood sugar, she writes, Step 1, write down your meals and your 1 and 2 hour post-meal blood sugar levels. 2, cut back on your carbs until you get to your target level for a blood sugar peak. The meals that give you peaks at or below that target level become part of your diabetic diet. And number 3, test, test, test. Try different foods and different combinations of food. Embrace the combinations that peak under your blood sugar target and discard those combinations of foods that go over it. Modify different combinations until they peak under your target level. Now, I need to say one more thing. If you're currently having blood glucose that's running over 200 when you wake up in the morning, this isn't going to work for you at first. After all, you'll be over 200 before you start, and you surely will be over 200 an hour or two later after your meals. So if you have very, very high glucose all the time, you'll just have to see which foods and meals raise your blood sugar the highest and start eliminating them. As a starter, cut way down on all carbohydrates and focus on eating mostly meats and vegetables. Your blood sugar will surely come down in time, and once you get it down to a reasonable level, you can start setting your glucose target for each meal. Now, people do spike at different times, so maybe for you 2 hours would be the ideal time to test your blood, and that can change over time. But what you need to look for is when your normal blood sugar peak happens after you finish your meals. Once you find that time, make that the major time that you test to see what your meals are doing to you. In fact, I often don't even test before the meal when I'm just doing it for myself. I'm interested in one thing: how high will my blood sugar rise after this meal? Okay, that's it for now. Hope you found that helpful. Again, we have some links to Jenny Ruhl's website and books in the description. I hope you'll like this video so that YouTube will be more inclined to promote it to others, and consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon so you'll be notified every time we post a new video. God bless. See you again soon.